Oh, man. The whole point is to share it on here.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Embarrass the shit out of yourself.
Keep the conversation, as random as possible.
And you're doing a fine job on your end.
What's happening, everybody? Jukebox back with. I'm going on 3 years now, guys. I'm going on 3 years of podcasting. This is fantastic. Welcome back to another episode of Stardom right here in JG's Lounge. And with me, I've got two return guests. To my right, your guys' left. I'm not sure how you're watching this, but I got Cory Kastle, man. How you doing?
How's it going? Hey, dude.
How's life over in your neck of the woods?
Oh, it's constantly improving. It's an ever evolving process. So, I'm changing the way I look at myself, so that I can change the way I look at the world.
That's a good way of putting it. Quiet White Man, welcome to the group. Welcome to the show. Beneath me, I got Chris Tidwell, man. How the hell are you, dude?
Fantastic. Getting, what is it, Columbus Day today? Columbus Day in the United States. Yeah, I don't work on these days because in Canada, where I live now, they call that, believe it or not, Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving prior, yeah. Or as I refer to it ever since I've lived here, Fakesgiving, because it ain't real. They didn't have no pilgrims. There was no, smallpox in the blankets. There was none of that kind of stuff. Like, I don't understand why because I guess it sounded better than calling it the harvest season, right? Because that's what
I think the harvest season would be like the second Halloween.
It should be, but none of these things should be before Halloween. Like Halloween is the first one for the fall, right? Are we agreed on that at least?
Yeah,
so to have Thanksgiving prior to that just doesn't make any sense. They haven't earned it.
It doesn't. I agree with you 100%.
I feel like there might be some trademark infringement or something.
Well, you guys, Chris, Cory, you're just meeting for the first time, but you guys clearly know the same circle of people because you both have been involved in wrestling. So it's always nice to bring people together that have never met on my show. It usually makes for a hell of a show.
Yeah,
let's hope.
I love it, man. Especially because you said, Chris, you've been around for 26 years or something. You've been in the business for 26 years, and being able to watch. I just hit 21 years. Being able to watch what the business has turned into from what it used to be, and both the good and the bad parts of it. On the mainstream, probably not the best, but I mean, it's interesting to see, and I'd like to get kind of other vets take on it. Pretty often.
Thing is, a lot of people, to me anyways, a lot of people think that like the business has changed. I mean, certain aspects of it have, but the business is always going to be the business. You know what I mean? The politics are always still going to be the same. The back end of the business is always going to be the same. Just the one thing that always changes though is that we get older. And as we get older, our likes from like when we were that, when we loved the business. Here's the thing that I say most importantly to some of our kids over at Crossbody where I train. I try to tell them you're going to learn a lot of things in this business, but the more you know about the business, the more you're going to hate the business. So stop worrying about the business part of it and just go have fun right now. Right. So that's the thing is like the moves have changed. They've got more acrobatic, more athleticism for sure than they were 25 years ago, 30 years ago, even. But the business is still everything that you were taught back then is what these guys are being taught now too. Right. So that's never going to change. Thankfully, hopefully.
I think the weird parts of it that have changed that I've noticed is exclusivity of being a professional wrestler is gone. Like
That's gone, long gone.
You like there used to be there was reasons why you weren't elite enough to be a part of this business. That you could get weeded out in the first week. Any of those documentaries you watch from like right before I had started in the business, you see guys at like the power plant and they're like, this is too hard. I don't think I can handle it. I'm not. And like it openly admitting I'm not tough enough for this business.
Sure.
And now at this point, people want to open schools and they want to train anybody who's got money, and they're gonna fast track them through.
Yep.
So the business has become more of what I say, like it used to be a talent show, like a show of talented people, and now it's just a participation show. Like,
but society is that. Society is that too, right? Like this is where we are in society. So you think about think like who are the people that were being taught when 25 years ago when I was breaking into the business and I wanted to become a professional wrestler. One of the first things that the person that trained me, I credit is Johnny Canine and Waldo Von Erich, the two guys that in the first day, Johnny Canine was like, we're going to see how tough you are. Like you want to be in the wrestling business. Before I could even answer, it was just straight jab to the jaw. Like, if you can take a punch, not necessarily a full on swing, like we're in a fight or something like that, but just a punch to the mouth. And how are you going to react to this?
Yeah.
Right.
You feel
Society has changed in a way that you can't do that nowadays with people, you know what I mean? Human beings, when they come in to train to become a professional wrestler. So you have to tackle it completely different, I think, with the new generation. And it's been over time. It's constantly changed, right? You also got to remember so you've got that end of it where some of us might think that it's a bit of more of a pussy way to go. You're not earning it as much, right? But then we've got the other end of it where the locker rooms, if I'm being completely honest, way cleaner, right? A lot less drugs, a lot less debauchery, a lot less bullshit going on in them because the new society of people is just different, I think. So it's not up to the business. I say this to all of the old workers that I talk to all the time, and we all have these conversations, and it's not up to the business to change to suit us, right? We have to make sure that we still change for the business and evolve along with the business. Otherwise you get left behind, right?
That's everything. I mean, it's funny because I don't even I don't follow wrestling. Yeah, sure. I've got a lot of respect for you guys, but everything you guys are saying relates to damn near anything.
Sure. Do you follow music? Think about music, for example, right? Same kind of thing. If bands aren't evolving, right, with the times, they just get left behind. Right. And I'm not talking about Kiss being sycophants and just like, hey, disco's cool. We're going to do a disco album. You know what I mean? Right. I mean, like really evolving, right? Like it just doesn't, it doesn't happen.
That's with everything too, on top of just working and music. Well, my other podcast, I interview artists, evolving with Cory Kastle. Yeah, that's your podcast. But like even musicians, I've had musicians that have been on since before social media. And they had to hustle to even stay where they're at, right. Or even if they don't exist anymore, they still had to hustle to get notoriety back then. And now people are just post shit. And more than half of it's either AI generated or it's just too bland and sounds like everything else. So like you have to stand out. You have to adapt. You have to evolve.
SoundCloud superstars, right? Everybody seems to be a SoundCloud superstar, it seems like.
And Cory, does that relate with comedy as well?
Oh yeah, man. I mean, because working a room, working a crowd, and crafting a joke is kind of different when it's like you're just making a TikTok. A TikTok gets laughs and it's like seconds at a time, but it's the same thing in a ring when there's like the dead silence in between stuff. It's like that on stage when you have a mic and there's like dead quiet between your punchlines, between your before your setup punch. So like wrestling and stand up are so like parallel in the fact that like the instant gratification, it's basically like you're trying to get a crowd reaction as often as you can get it. And it's way more difficult. I say constantly, I took it from Al Snow saying the experience is the best teacher. So of course that can relate to pro wrestling, but that of course relates to every other thing, including stand-up comedy, because like being up on stage, it's unless you do it, you don't know what it's like. Like when those you don't expect the lights to be as bright as they are. You don't expect to be as nervous when those people's eyes are right on your eyes and you can see them like straight up. In wrestling, the people are kind of behind you, a little like kind of all around you, and they're not like directly in your face. So like in stand up, it's a little bit different. And
you've got a partner in wrestling or multiple partners in wrestling. So you're putting on a show rather than just yourself. You know what I mean?
Right.
Oh, hey, Tip. Good evening to you.
Hello, Tip.
A rhetorical conversation, like in a room of 1,000 people, you're the only one facing the wrong direction.
Absolutely.
So all that pressure's on you the same way the pressure's on you when you're like brand new and you don't know what moves to do next.
And the lifestyles are the same too. Every comedian that I know, I've met one or two of them, and all the stories are very parallel with the stories of professional wrestling, the travel, the sleeping in your car if you have to, the shitty promoters trying to rip you off and pay you with a handshake and a hot dog, the constant grind of just trying to get noticed, right?
Yeah.
And then trying to get, onto a bill, and then trying to get residency, and then trying to be able to make a living out of it. Like there's so many parallels, even to the point where some of the fans, there's even parallels to the same kind of fans you see at comedy shows, or the same kind of fans, sometimes that you see at pro wrestling shows too. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's so changed in the last 10 years, I'd say, in comedy. Like in comedy, I never would talk about my wrestling career. I never mentioned it because it was like looked down on or something. Like people didn't understand it, so they didn't like watch it and they didn't care. But now if I talk about wrestling, all the comics know what I'm talking about. Every comedian is a fan of wrestling, and it's like they're not a fan of my wrestling. They don't know who I am. So it's it's like it's a whole other thing.
We've all been there though. You know what I mean? It's like, friends of your spouses or your friends or whatever, friends of friends, and they're like, oh, what do you do? How do you know so and so or whatever? I'm a professional wrestler. Oh, like you work for WWE? No. And that's the end of the conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I probably travel just as much, and I have a lot less massage therapy in the back, and I don't have somebody to sew up my gear, and there's not a lot of lights. And sometimes, I'm sleeping on a friend's floor. Like, but other than that, it's exactly the same.
I've met so many like wrestlers lately, more recently than past. I mean, Cory, I met you first, but like a lot of them are funny, like whether they're in comedy or not, they have a comical aspect and they know how to like act. One big thing about
timing. There's something about timing that wrestlers,
and
like,
it's a big thing.
It's in our bone marrow.
Yeah, and it's a big thing for me when I do podcasts, because when I do a podcast, I try to line it up. Like the conversation can go wherever it wants, but I think of clips in my head, because you talk about TikTok and content. That's how you get noticed. So when I'm doing these, I'm thinking, okay, where can I do timestamps? Where can I make clips out of the content that I'm getting right now? And if I have somebody that doesn't know how to react, it makes a really boring show, and it makes real boring content that I can't use.
Yeah,
dude. I mean, I've been podcasting now for 10 years, and I have had so many guests that have not fed me like the way I'd like. I can't polish this turd enough to make great content out of it. Like it's just like It's very clear that this person's never been a guest on a podcast before, and it's very clear that they don't listen to podcasts. It's almost like they don't really know what a podcast even is. So
I didn't know what one was until I started doing it. I had no idea what a podcast was.
Yeah, you're one of the ones whose podcast I've cringed through. No, I'm just kidding.
Thanks. Appreciate it, man. All right, well, let's get into tonight's topic, man. I mean, we're 15 minutes in and we haven't even talked about the damn show.
Is it about slipping on a mop? I don't what
No, actually, your first show was cringy stories. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. But no, we are going, this is the first of the 4-night stretch that I'm doing tonight, and I want to keep it Halloween oriented, so I'm going with fear and phobias. So first off, I want to talk about what your guys' fears are before we get into the ones that I picked. Whoever wants to go first. Chris, I'll pick you.
What kind of fears are we talking about? Are we talking about
it can be a personal fear from your childhood?
Yeah. I mean, okay, this isn't like some deep, dark, like therapy session where I'm going to be like, I have a fear of being in a room alone with my uncle.
No, I mean, if that's a rabbit hole we're going down, let's do it. Let's get going.
I thought you were going to say fear of being alone with my thoughts, and then you said uncle, and I cringed even harder. And I emotionally backed away.
Well, for example, I'm terrified of dolls. I'm absolutely terrified of like those realistic looking dolls.
Really?
Yeah,
a real doll. So you couldn't own a real doll, is what you're saying,
right? No, I could not.
Even if it was made specifically to your likes, and it looked exactly like the way.
Even if it came with KY as an extra, no, it would not work. My great grandma. Okay.
Dylan, you're the best. I love you. I love you.
My great grandma had Alzheimer's. My great grandma had real bad Alzheimer's, and she couldn't remember who you were for every 5 minutes. But she had her house lined with these porcelain dolls, and she named every one of them. She had conversations with them. You'd wake up at 3 a.m. with her arguing with them. She'd bathe them, and it was terrifying. As a 6-7-year-old kid growing up, going and visiting your great grandma, and staying the night. I mean, she lived in Utah. I live in Kansas City, so we'd be there for a week on end and sleeping in this house full of dolls. It was absolutely fucking terrifying. So even today, I'm still scared of dolls.
That makes sense.
I don't think they scare me so much, but it does always remind me of like old Twilight Zone episodes or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And scary, like when the dummy, the ventriloquist dummy starts talking on its own or something like that. It's what you always expect from like scary dolls, and they use them in the movies and stuff. I think for me, it's not so much like it's not something that you can see in front of you. Like if I can see it, I'm okay with it. Right. But I'll tell you straight up what I am not a fan of. And I go diving, I go snorkeling, all of that. But that middle of the ocean shit, you can stick that straight up your ass. I have zero desire, because I'm telling you. So I went and saw a movie, right, recently.
Right.
We went and saw that Meg 2, The Trench.
I just watched it. Yeah.
All right. So then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like there's areas, obviously, that far down in the ocean where we don't know what's down there. Even outside of movie bullshit or anything like that, we don't know what's down that far. So if you're trying to tell me that something down there couldn't possibly be that big and get out of there to get you, I know for a fact Godzilla comes from down there. So fuck everything about the bottom of the ocean floor and being stuck on one of those like gigantic cruise ships, you know what I mean, out in the middle of the ocean does zero for me, man. I want my feet on the ground. I don't want to know anything about that shit.
That was one of the phobias right there. Is the thalassophobia.
I think.
Well, that's what I got.
I think we need to mark this as a moment in history. Never before has anyone ever talked about Godzilla and a fact, knowing it for a fact that Godzilla came from somewhere.
100%. I've seen every one of them, and they all have the same thing. And that's the fact that he lives at the bottom of the ocean. So you have to know that many, listen, how many books are there in the Bible? And we believe that to be true. I believe that there's that many Godzilla movies. So it has to some point, some of it has to be based in fact.
Right. And Don't they say that like after so many people think of it, it automatically creates it, so it exists?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Yeah. Like Trumpisms.
Yeah.
I worked at this office job, and the one time we had team meetings every Monday, and I missed the meeting one week, and the
Mhm.
kid that I sat next to at work, I was like, "What did I miss at the meeting?" And he's like, "Nothing super important, but we all learned that Linda is a real idiot." And I was like, "Why you say Linda's an idiot?" And he was like, She thought Tarzan and Jane were real people. Like she thought that book was a biography of these people who actually existed. And I was like, okay, yeah, I guess Linda is kind of an idiot. And and then he was like, and then get this. That dunce, she was talking about Adam and Eve, and she was getting all the facts wrong. And I was like, wait a minute.
Yep.
And you're saying she's an idiot for thinking that Adam and Eve, trying to think that Tarzan and Jane are real. So she's an idiot for thinking Tarzan and Jane are real. And you're not an idiot for thinking that Adam and Eve is fact.
I mean,
contemplate this.
right? It's
Now,
funny when you say things out loud.
right?
And at the same time, we're breathing the same air.
Mhm.
So I gotta start figuring out how
And paying the same price for it. Paying the same price for that air. You know that you should be like getting a discount or at least, or they should pay a premium, like earn it somehow, right?
Yep, that's right. No,
Put that air in a bag and charge them to breathe it.
And running a business, like I know you run still warehouses, is that right?
Correct.
And I run kitchens even where I'm at now, and having employees that talk like that, it's hard to bite your tongue. But you have to, man. Like the way that the world is now, like if you say one wrong thing, like it's harassment charges just for saying that you're a fucking idiot.
So this is what I've learned though, that instead of doing that, it's much more fun to just feed the fire a little bit. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
If you've got a flat earther that like works for you or something like that, just say, hey, I just heard this awesome thing. Cool. I got to go back to doing what I'm doing, but take that little nugget and go bug your coworkers with it.
I had a flat earther on here, David Weiss, and it was hard enough to get him on here. I had to fill out like forms and requests and shit. And then literally, I didn't like talk shit. I just kind of like questioned his thoughts. And off of that, I got a fuck ton of views and negative responses from his posse complaining about how I didn't give him a chance to talk. And I'm like, no, he definitely had a chance to talk. He just didn't give any valid points.
Yeah. It's a funny thing with conspiracies and stuff like that is that, listen, I want to believe every single one of these things. I think it would be fantastic. The world would be so much more interesting if all of this stuff was real. You know what I mean? But come on, dog. You got to come at me with some like pretty undeniable like truths. You know what I mean? For it to be real. So please get those and bring them. But until then, I'm just not. I'm not buying it for the sake that there's just some ice wall. And
just not that into you. I'm sorry.
I mean, there are airports all over the world, and airplanes and air traffic controllers who map out the air traffic based around the world being around and getting from one part of the round world to the. Are you saying all those people have been lied to and are not sure what they're doing as part of their like full-time careers? Their whole entire careers have all. Come on, dude. Come on.
Yeah, that's exactly what they're saying. But all of those pilots, how many views do they have?
Right? There's 6 views.
Yeah, what's their social footprint like?
We're really interested.
I've got 3,000 people. I've got 3,000 people to back me. Cool. 3,000 out of how many billion of people?
Right?
Yeah.
All right, Cory, come on, man. What's your fear, dude? Bring it on.
My biggest fear is getting wrapped up in conspiracy theory and absolutely believing it when it's ridiculous. My fear. No, but I'd say I'm gonna say the same thing. Like that, the fear of drowning. Drowning to death is a huge fear. I'd say of mine.
Right.
I mean, I have been on cruise ships. I enjoy those, but I'm not afraid of sea creatures swallowing up cruise boats. But I would say
That'd be an impressive way to die, though. I mean, honestly, if you were one of the passengers on a cruise line and Godzilla ripped the boat in half, that'd be a pretty impressive way to die. I gotta say,
Right? Oh, what? This is crazy, right? You think that's just fucking crazy talk that there could actually be those kind of sea creatures, right? But people can go around and talk their flat earth bullshit, and we're just supposed to believe that? Fuck that. I'm starting a sea creatures fucking union right now, all right?
Truthers.
The flying spaghetti monster. Fuck that.
Yeah.
We got sea creatures that exist.
Yeah, we're going. You've heard of flat earthers. We're deep oceaners. That's what we're going to call ourselves.
I do agree with like the Meg concept though. Like the fact that there's layers that deep that we've never explored.
Oh,
There's
like
Yeah.
Hollow Earth.
There's
Hollow
definitely
Earth is
out there.
something. It's something. I mean, I've dived deep into that rabbit hole myself. Like the Hollow Earth theory and like the lost city of Atlantis, all that sort of stuff. That fascinates me. I'm definitely very fascinated with deep diving into, like, if you follow Billy Carson, the Anunnaki and the forbidden knowledge, like all that stuff is really, he lays it all out, and he's very intelligent about everything he says. And he has decoded the scrolls and all that stuff. I mean, if this is the first time you're hearing of the Anunnaki or Billy Carson, go ahead and Google that. Go ahead and Google any of that information, because it's fascinating. It's fascinating, and it kind of changes your idea of like the cognitive dissonance that we've all been consuming our entire lives about where our faith should be, and you know, it's definitely more leaning along the edge of, this is kind of a simulation that we're living in, and it's multi-layered. But the Earth isn't flat.
No. And we okay, if you think about it, in the ocean, every single year, they find 10 to 20 new species of something that they've never found before. Almost damn near every year, right? They find this. We know of islands that exist, right? That are like inhabited by humans, uncivilized as fuck, and you are not allowed to go within a certain radius because they can kill you and everything is just hunky-dory, because that's your problem, not theirs. So to think that there isn't, you know, deep earthers or people living there or creatures under the sea, or the fact that we're just the only ones out there, to think that we're that fucking special. I mean, come on. There's a lot out there that we don't know about.
Huge waste of space. But it's a huge waste. If there's infinite amount of infinities out there of space and time, and there's nothing out there besides what we are. Come on,
But again, I want to see
how many people were phased by the government coming out saying, nope, they exist? Nobody. Because that doesn't mean anything. Saying that they exist doesn't fucking mean anything.
There's no like true evidence to it. Like,
that's what I'm saying. Like you just lip service. It's just lip service. Give me something. Like I said at the beginning of this, I want to believe all of this. I want so badly for there to be something, but you can't just say, well, because my neighbor's mailman knows a guy who works with his sister down at the DMV, and she said a guy came in this one time who knew somebody else that was talking to another guy that said his wife told him that there was an alien. It's like, okay, come on.
Hearsay.
Come on. Yeah.
Have you seen the documentary Zeitgeist?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I don't think I have.
It talks about basically how anything biblical or religious at all breaks down to astrology and the stars. And then they talk about how like natives use the stars to kind of tell stories to their children, and basically how all religion and everything we know was originated from stories through the stars. And literally everything is broken down to, from the sun setting to the sun rising, Bethlehem being a constellation, everything is related to what we see in the sky.
Well, like the thing is, man, the Bible has been translated so many times from so many people who aren't impartial. Like any of those translations can be put in the hands of somebody who goes, "Oh wait, I'm going to change that. No, gay people are the worst. Let's get rid of that." No, don't clip that and just put that Cory Kastle said gay people are the worst.
That's actually the only thing I'm going to post. That's the next thing after we're done with this conversation.
Quick side note for you. You know that version of Jesus Christ that we all see. You know, the beautiful tan skinned, long haired. I said beautiful. You know what I mean? But that version, that North American version of Jesus, we know where that came from, right? Like who the first person to paint that version was Michelangelo. Michelangelo, and the story goes that his interpretation of that Jesus Christ that he painted for everybody was actually his interpretation of he was painting his gay lover.
Mm-hmm.
So that version that you see of Jesus Christ that everybody puts all of their stuff into was basically just Michelangelo's boy toy.
Dude, Andrew Santino has a special on Netflix, and he jumps into this whole bit about Jesus being gay, and it's amazing. He's like, "I walk on the water," and he's like, "Let's take water into wine," and like the whole.
It's funny because I grew up strict Pentecostal, and when my cousin turned 18 and came out that she was gay, they locked her in her room for 2 weeks, told her she couldn't be, and then when she kept saying no, I'm gay, they adapted to different churches until they found one that was acceptable of gays. So like I grew up with this like hardcore teaching, and then no, we're just gonna switch because one of the family members decided that they're gonna be not that.
I once had a Lutheran Christian on my podcast, and actually this guy was a writer for the Ellen show, Ellen DeGeneres, and I was like, I had never met a Lutheran Christian before. I didn't know what to ask him, and I was like, "What do you think happens when you die?" And he started going into like, heaven and stuff, and I was like, "What do you think? What do you think of gay marriage?" And he said, "It's not real." And I was like, in my head, I was like, this is what people say about professional wrestling. So gay marriage and professional wrestling are so similar in this guy's head. It's just not real. It's not real.
That's right. It's a couple of grown men rolling around in their underwear, and if you really like it, you'll get hard. Just like pro wrestling.
Yeah. And there's a pop at the end.
I'm actually interviewing a Satanist Thursday morning, and he has to be one of the most polite people I've met.
Sure.
I have a good friend who's a Satanist, and she's told me all about it, and she doesn't. It's not that she cares about that; it's that she's so anti-caring about everything else.
It's like it's an anti-religion. Religion is basically what it is. I mean, this guy doesn't even believe in Satan. Like, it's just
Satan, but it's more of like screw everything else, anarchy. From what I can tell.
Right.
I haven't really gone into deep dives with her on it, and I really kind of don't want to.
Right.
Sometimes it's about like the kind of information I'm inviting into my space. So the kind of content I consume, and the kind of like when we're talking about Halloween and horror movies, and then the like anything that's like possession and like evil spirits and stuff, that stuff, it's not that I believe in it, but it's that it's a certain imagery that that can maybe affect the way I like. I don't know. Like it's my vibration doesn't feel good. It's not that I'm scared. It's that I'm not feeling good.
Do you think people can get possessed?
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know if I really believe in that sort of thing. I want to believe. I absolutely do. I had a straight edge girlfriend, and she was like telling me about. She's an atheist straight edge, and she was telling me about how like she was afraid of ghosts, and I was like, you can't be an atheist and believe in ghosts at the same time, silly goose. I think you can only be one or the other. I don't think you can have.
No,
you can't be. You believe in nothing. That's what being an atheist is, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
And then as this year
So
started,
do you hold on? Do you believe in something? Do you believe that there's something out there?
I mean, I have to believe in something. It's that
Right.
I feels like that's the drum beat that keeps me going, is believing in something. But as far as like believing in ghosts, I don't know if I believe in they're gonna boo and jump out and scare. I don't think of it that way. As this year started, January, February, and March, I worked at a cemetery. So I worked at a cemetery every single day. So every day into the night, while it was still night, I never saw a ghost. I never heard any ghost stories or anything like that from anybody who worked there. That's not like something you'd hear so much more about it if that was like a real thing, but it's kind of, it's fairy tale.
What do you think, Chris?
I think a lot of people interpret their own spirituality onto other things. For example, like, a close relative dies and then the next day you see an owl or whatever that you've never seen before on top of your house. So you think that you're manifesting that into being that bird. You know what I mean? Like you taking your own faith. It doesn't have to be a religious faith, just your own faith in believing that maybe there is a spiritual thing out there, and you try to connect with it, and you'll look at things like that. But anything can be interpreted. You know as well as I do that the narrative can change at any given time, right? So you can do whatever you have to do to believe it. That's cool. Right. I'm okay with all of that stuff. Don't try to tell me that there's some, spaceship coming to take everybody away at a certain time. And this is why you're knocking on my door on a fucking Saturday, to try to hand me a little pamphlet, but there's only X amount of seats. So, I mean, I don't know why I'm here telling you this, because I'm going to be in one of those seats. Why do you want me to be a part of your little thing so that I take one of those seats? That's a little too much. That's a little crazy. You know what I mean? But I understand that people will use this. I've never seen a ghost. I've never been haunted. I don't know anybody who's ever been possessed. You know what I mean? And I've done a fucking goose's, or a giraffe's fucking chin amount of drugs in my time, and never gotten like PCP'd out and whacked out to where it's like, oh, I'm seeing, illusions of grandeur, and I go off on some fucking kind of like I'm Jesus Christ spree or something like that. I think a lot of times with a lot of that they almost take it's almost taken too far. It's almost taken too far, and it's buried itself. It's wormholed itself into their brain.
Yes,
you know what I mean? And they don't see it. Yeah, they don't see enough of outside of the blinders to understand that they're only looking at one thing, and there's so many more factors to everything, just the way that we live. There's so many more factors to it. So to think that there's not, there might very well be. Do I have any proof? No, it falls under conspiracy theory for me. The whole ghost and stuff, because until you show me something, and I don't mean like fucking ghost hunters shows on TV or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, all right, come talk to me. You know what I mean? Houdini, one of the greatest magicians ever to live. Houdini said, if there's such a thing as ghosts, right, and it's a trick, I'll find a way to tell you. Well, he ain't found a way to tell anybody,
Right.
you know.
I mean, it's faith. That's what faith
Dude,
is. I mean, just
one of-
believing in something.
I wrestle with one of the guys who's like one of the biggest ghost hunters on YouTube, and like we're wrestlers, we're carnies.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
I've never straight up asked him, but like I get it, Like we're charlatans. We come up here and we put on a show. We manipulate your emotions. That's part of what we do. Like we invented clickbait, but before clicking anything ever existed.
Yeah.
Right.
Pro wrestling is the show, like
Right.
everything you watch, everything you've seen or consumed has been influenced by the work that wrestling has done.
Right.
So I think storytelling and ghost stories and all that stuff falls right in line with that.
Personally, I mean, my opinion on it is that we are reincarnated as we're an energy, and that as an energy doesn't just die off. Energy goes somewhere and it continues to grow. But our bodies, don't live long enough for us to learn all the lessons we need to learn. So we just get reincarnated until we learn these lessons, and we just continue to grow as an energy.
What happens to your body?
It
just
die. I mean,
turns to
it's
mush.
it's just mush. It's just a physical form for you to encapsulate. You learn lessons, whether you die. This is why, I mean, people procreate and they have drugs in their system, so they have disabled children. I mean, there's so many things that come into play. You don't choose what you go into. You don't choose to be gay or straight. It's something. When you're an energy, you're not a
Well,
sex.
there was one Saturday night that I chose.
I mean, there's a decision that really goes through your mind.
Fuck, do I want to
decision
sleep?
time.
Do I want to sleep on the floor? That bed looks really comfortable.
There's a whole okay, to be gay is one thing, but to act upon those thoughts, there's a decision making process.
That's great.
Like I think Louis C.K. was like, it's like anybody who's like, oh, I'm gonna suck you. Like every new dick you take takes something out of you.
Right,
Chris, what were you gonna ask?
I was going to say, why is it that you don't think that like more people, if we're just an energy that's constantly evolving or constantly transferring into the next thing and reincarnated into the next thing, why don't we remember any of those thoughts from previous?
I think it's just a matter of understanding. I mean, and that's why some people have dreams and nightmares of things that have happened in their past lives, or even like the idea of flying. I mean, if you're just an energy like passing through lives, that would explain kind of those dream thoughts. Like, this is just, my opinion and my thought on all this. Again, this is like, let's say you're a male and in your energy, you just know to care or know to understand things or love, but you're not a certain gender, and you come back as a female, and then you decide, oh, I love females still because it carried over from that last life. I mean, is there a way to explain it? No, but I mean, it makes sense.
I mean, yes, by default, because if you can't explain it, then it has to make some kind of sense,
right? That's with everything.
Dude,
I mean,
I am the most spiritual nihilist there is. Like, I've sat in sacred ceremonies and like spoke to spirit. Like, I get it. But at the same time, I think everything is so super random and nothing matters. Like,
right. Well, realistically, does it matter at the end of the day? No,
nihilistic.
because we don't know.
Right. Because there's no way we can know. And maybe there's no way that we're supposed to know. Like, I think somehow, like, it's not meant for us to know everything. Like, the same way, like, not everybody's supposed to like everything. Like, it's okay for people to get offended by stuff I say, because not everything I say is something you got to agree with. Like, and I'm not going to agree with everything you think. Like, that we're people, we're different. And I think that we're not supposed to know the answer. I don't think we're supposed to know. Like, we're not supposed to know about ghosts, and we're not supposed to know about heaven and hell and that kind of stuff. But
I don't think hell exists either.
I don't think hell exists either. Yeah, I think that's part of the translations over and over again in order to manipulate mass amounts of people to behave.
Right. And just thinking, I mean, the idea of hell is an eternal damnation and misery and pain, but like you have to have something to process that emotion, and you just can't live that way.
Well, it
So it's
can't all be
physical,
good. That's the thing.
No?
That's the underlying thing with religion, is that
Right.
find me a religion that isn't based out of fear. Right?
Right.
The fear of, if you don't act accordingly, you're going to be punished this way. So that's what hell is, really. Right.
Mhm.
So but then the question is, how can you be an all loving, all forgiving, sentient being like God and still condemn people to hell?
Right.
Like it's all fear based to try to get you to live your life a certain way, to the way
Right.
that they want you to, because every religion, is just slightly a little bit different. You know what I mean? And not every one of them is based on Old Testament or New Testament stuff like that. You get, the Mormons that say that one guy in his sleep was talked to by an angel, and and then you've got like Jehovah's Witnesses that is like, there's only so many seats in heaven for us, and you've got, and there's just so many little tiny changes to it. But at the end of the day, it's all based on the fact that if you don't do what we say, you will be punished. Now, listen, I left home at 15. I couldn't even get my own fucking mother to tell me what to do. All right. So that's not working out so well. Sorry.
I want to see if this clip will play, and tell me if you guys can hear this. But this is a guy that I've got coming on Thursday, and he actually says something similar to what you just said. Let's see if this works here. Nope, that ain't working. Never mind.
No.
It's too glitchy. Too glitchy.
I wanted to
Anyways, he talks about
I wanted to believe.
he talks about I would never worship a God that would just send somebody to eternal damnation for the simple fact of not believing in him. Yeah. And there's fact to that. I mean, there's a lot of fact.
I think
that.
what it is you're not worshiping God himself. You're not worshiping God itself. You're not worship. You're going to a middleman who's going, I've got all the answers, when really that middleman is a flawed human just like you are, and don't have any right to stand on any high ground and judge you. And that's all they try to do.
Mm-hmm.
And church was the first show business. I think that's what made me want to do comedy and speak into a microphone for a living.
Listen, I'll tell you straight up, my promoting skills from what, learning what I learned from the old timers before me, and they'd all say the same thing. Go watch televangelists. Go watch old school barkers and televangelists, because the way that they speak, the way that they use their words, the way that they stop in between, the way that they slow down, speed up, go high, go low, that entire thing. When you listen to televangelists talk, you're listening to somebody cut a wrestling promo every single time.
Dude, priests are the biggest carnies.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Come one, come all. Witness me, speak to God and not you.
There is one thing that I have to say that terrified me in the church, and that was people who spoke in tongues. Because I mean, I witnessed it, and I know that it exists, but I don't know what the fuck it is. And I don't think they're fucking talking to God, but whatever it is, it's damn near like they're being like a possession. It's weird. Like I witnessed my sister go into this speaking in tongues for like 2 hours, and I had to carry her to the damn car because she was just done. Like you just hear her lips moving, and that's all for like 2 hours straight. So it terrified the shit out of me.
She got carried away, both literally and figuratively.
So wrestlers have their own language too for the longest time. You have to remember that, right? They always spoke Carney, and Carney was a real language, right? Where it's their own language that Carnies would call to one another, would speak to one another, that nobody else understood, basically speaking in tongues, right? And there's even some old wrestlers, like Wahoo McDaniels was one of these guys. He would sit there and never talk to you in the back. You just knew what the finish was. That was it. And you'd get out there and he would call the entire match to you in Carney. So if you didn't know how to speak carny to some of these guys, they would just say, fuck it, and just beat the living shit out of you and be done with it. That was pro wrestling back in the day, right? So the language thing has always been there. It's this weird world, man, that has so many parallels to religion in itself, right?
I think sometimes people grasp so hard to trying to find some sort of inclusion or identity that they allow themselves to believe that they're wrapped really hard up inside that speaking tongues thing. I think you worked yourself into a shoot on that one. Like with anybody who gets into that.
Well,
like
it's just like going into ghost hunting and going to a house with the concept of I'm going to see something, but then it totally discredits anything you see because it's like you mentally were ready to see something. So
hypnotism.
Yeah,
isn't that one of those things too? Like, right? Because they'll tell you if you're not willing to be hypnotized, you can't be hypnotized.
Yeah,
that's us at our base form right there, right?
Like,
either you believe it or you don't believe it.
We're flawed.
I think being on both sides of the barricade, it's tough. It's tough to not have me go, yeah, it's all a work. Everything's a work. Like every single thing is a work. Like,
but you're jaded. You're jaded because a world that you loved before you found out about it was a certain way. Then once you found out about it, you're like, oh, I just found out Santa wasn't real. The Wizard of Oz is just a short little fat man behind a curtain, and everything in this pro wrestling world that I loved and thought was so magical is just a big fucking work. Oh, this sucks.
I don't like to draw comparisons to Santa Claus and professional wrestling. I will go to my deathbed and resent anyone who tries to compare Santa Claus to professional wrestling. Don't do that. It's not the same.
It's all marketing. Santa Claus is a marketing gimmick.
And we're like, I guess when people get to the point where they stop believing in Santa Claus, then they start maybe resenting their parents for putting them through the charade, and maybe in their head go, oh, my parents were misleading me. And that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to entertain you. We're trying to bring joy into your life. That's what they're trying to do too. But like Santa Claus as a person isn't a real person, right? Am I really revealing anything?
We don't know. We don't know this.
I think
we don't know this.
I'm pretty sure Saint Nicholas existed, but Santa Claus is not Saint Nicholas.
But yeah, like the risks that wrestlers take is real. The sacrifices that wrestlers make is real. So anytime anybody starts getting butthurt about pro wrestling being fake or whatever, it's like I feel like if you can't get past the fact that it's a work and you can still watch movies and get yourself lost in those, you're just small-minded. Like I just look at you as like, I don't look at you as the way I look at it. Also, I say this about independent wrestling all the time. Like, it works a lot like being in a cover band, except for somehow the people who play guitar in a cover band get called talented in real life. But what I get called is a phony. And that, like, I don't really like that very much. But I'd say like what we're doing is talent, and it should be respected like sports are respected. But it's like it's somehow a different category because it's fake. But like everything you watch is scripted. Reality TV shows, you think that's reality in real life?
But I think it goes back. It may go back. It may possibly go back to what we were talking about at the very beginning of all of this stuff, with the world of wrestling and how it's changed and evolved. And there are so many more people in it now. So that doesn't necessarily mean that all of those people in it are good, right? I'm sure you've seen some people that, like, I know for a fact, I've been in matches with people, where I've literally been like, burn your fucking boots. Like, you have no business being in this business, right? But that's not my place to tell them. I'm not their trainer. I'm not the promoter. I'm not the booker. I'm not any of those things. I'm just another guy in the back who can give that guy his opinion. He'll take and do whatever he wants with it, right? But the fact that like so many people have been let in, and all it takes, you know as well as I do, both of you, and anybody listening, you know as well as I do, you go to a show and you see one bad performer in that field, and then the paintbrush comes out and everybody gets painted with it. So as soon as you tell them, oh, I do this, it doesn't matter how fucking good you are at it. Right. You've been paintbrushed into the same picture as that one time that they saw somebody who was a backyarder, you know what I mean? Entertain somebody at a fair show under the guise of being a professional. Right.
Yeah.
It's the same as seeing a shitty cover band.
Yeah, man.
You know?
I do like when anyone comes up to me who's like, oh, I have a friend who's a wrestler. And then I'm like, oh, who's that? And they'll tell me somebody who like for sure doesn't wear real gear and doesn't train and isn't like a professional in my eyes. They're just somebody who's playing wrestler and isn't actually doing it. I'm like, yeah, they don't do what I do. They're not a wrestler like I'm a wrestler. Like I'm a professional wrestler. That person is somebody who is a hobbyist. And,
it's not, and like what you guys do or have done is not like a high school wrestling either. It's, you know, these are different things, yet somehow they seem to get entangled into the same general sense.
Right.
They're totally different things.
Yeah. Well, they'll ask you, they're like, oh, you mean like the WWF stuff? Or the UFC stuff. There's nothing else in their world other than these two entities, apparently.
A recent thing that has been triggering me in what people say to me,
right?
When they say, "Oh, wrestling? Oh, yeah. My son is on his wrestling team in school," and then they'll be like. And then they'll start talking about that wrestling, and then they'll call it actual wrestling. And when they say actual wrestling, I have to automatically go, future reference, don't say actual wrestling to a professional wrestler when talking about collegiate wrestling. When talking about amateur wrestling, because we get paid to do what we do. They do it for free at their school. Like we take actual risks and we can throw punches.
Right.
That's right. Now we may have to slap a thigh or two on throwing that punch. You know, that happens.
Yeah, a good leg slap. Good leg slap.
Well, hey, Cory, didn't you show me? Weren't you at a show where somebody had a weed eater?
Yeah. Tournament of Death. CZW. When I first was starting, CZW did a Tournament of Death where Sick Nick Mondo and Wife Beater did a match where they had a weed whacker as the finish of their match, and that was sick to see. I've never done anything like that, but that happened to be around the time I started, so it was like 2001 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I never got into deathmatch wrestling. That's not something I do. I don't think that's very professional. I think that's not a good presentation of what our business is, and I think I want to be part of the solution of how people look at wrestling and take it seriously, not part of the problem, which is like, oh, well, nothing hurts. If these guys can survive this stuff and shake it off like it doesn't hurt, nothing hurts then, I guess. You know what I mean? It doesn't take talent to get hit with weapons.
Right.
I think it does. I think it does take a cerertain amount.
Oh,
it does take a certain amount to work with those type of weapons. I've always been a big proponent. I've always been a big proponent of like, I understand working within your element. Mm-hmm. And, you know, so I understand things like the guardrails being used. I understand a ladder, why that would be there. I understand chairs. I even understand like, you know, a table, why those things would be there at a wrestling show. At no time inside of a fucking arena do you need a weed whacker. At no time do you need a spider web of barbed wire inside of this arena, unless you're going after the sole purpose of using it as a gimmick inside of your match. And if you're going to do that, then at least try to use it usefully instead of just for, hey, we're going to pop the boys in the back, which is always a very big thing nowadays, it seems like, in professional wrestling. So, and listen, I'm guilty. I've worked barbed wire matches when I was, we were doing a circuit and we'd be in a different town every night, and I'd work a barbed wire match every single night of the week with the same exact person. Never touched the fucking barbed wire once. I mean, I've gone through a shit ton of tables in my life. I've gone through, jumped off of high stuff. You know what I mean? You got to remember, like in the early 2000s, that ECW craze it infiltrated its way and fested all into, down into the indie level. So at some point, some of these guys, we had to do those silly things.
I know.
Yeah.
About
100%, right? Like 100%.
I grew up going ECW shows. Yeah.
Right. So I get it. I get it. But at no time, why is there 30 light tubes underneath the ring? Right. Why is there a jar of gasoline? There's certain things that I understand. Work with your elements, work with your surroundings to put on this show. But as soon as you start bringing in outside props for it, well, now you've changed the element, you've changed the environment, right?
Yeah, like we want to try to make those things matter, like the tools that would make like hardcore wrestling. That hardcore wrestling isn't something I have a problem with. Death matches, like excessive blood for no reason that didn't get built up, like that didn't get worked to, like it's just like start a match, gig. That's not something I'm a fan of. I'm not a fan of that at all. I'd say I just hit 21 years. Just hit 21 years in September that I've been wrestling. I've gigged once, and I don't think I'll ever do it again. I feel like everything I've done barbed wire matches myself. I've done all the weapons. I've done pretty much everything. I've done ladder matches. I've done cage matches. All that stuff, and I just feel like it's all been something that you're building towards, because like you want more fans to show up for that. Like if you're going to give them that every time, then people are going to get sick of it. And like, and it's also going to shorten your career. Like
100%.
Yep. There's no longevity.
Yeah, you got, like you said, evolving and adapting and being creative. I feel like building just for the audience eventually kind of tapers to nothing, right?
Yeah, because if they've seen it, then what are you going to give them? Eventually, you're going to have to sit in the middle of the ring with a shotgun and Kurt Cobain yourself for the entertainment of these fans out there, because it's escalating to that point. You know what I mean? Because now you've given them a taste of this, and they're like, well, we saw it over here. Why can't you do it? And it's a copycat business. You know what I mean? When somebody does it, somebody else is going to try to do it. Right.
Yeah. And I want to, kind of wrap this up, but I want to talk about kind of basically what we've encapsulated. It comes to this is the audience might be interested in what you do, but by the time you have that down, they're on to something else. So why do what everybody else is doing? Just, be unique, be you, and don't worry about whatever the fuck everybody else is watching and what everybody else. This TikTok got 3 million views. Well, in 2 days, nobody's going to give a shit about that. I promise you, they're not going to care.
Something I always say to anybody who I'm working with in wrestling, I will always go together and look at the card. We'll look at the card and see what's on before us and what's on after us, and how we can be different than that from both of those things. So I understand that most of the people who are at a wrestling event maybe have never been to a wrestling event before and already have a preconceived idea of what they are going to see that night.
Right.
And I want to make sure I have them leaving the show with a different idea and some moments that they go, that guy who had his name, he had Castle with a K on his butt. That guy, he changed my idea of what I thought this was going to be like. Right. And I want to do that with anything I do. I approach everything. I learned that through wrestling, and I use that approach with podcasting now and with comedy. And it's like, you know, when I come out on stage and I try to start doing jokes, I guess I have to maybe try to disarm them a little bit, because like, who wouldn't look at me and just hate me right off the bat? Look at me, like this stupid beard and my man bun and all the whole presentation. Unless I go, okay, well, why would you want to listen to me? I better say something that punches quick, you know.
Chris, how long you been podcasting, man?
This time around with the new stuff I've been doing with Godfathers of Podcasting and then my own stuff, 4 or 5 years. Now I started doing all of this, but prior to that, we did a show called The O Show, and then we go all the way back to 1996. I started on internet radio. It was called right. There wasn't even podcasting really in 96. It was just, there was internet radio stations, and there was one out of Canada called Virtually Canadian. And we started the very first radio show, internet radio show about professional wrestling called Live Audio Wrestling. And that went on and lasted for Fight Network ended up buying it. And, you know, it ended up doing its own thing. I walked away from it because I was too busy actually wrestling. But I mean, if you go all the way back to when it started, 1996, you know, off and on pretty much since then. Yeah,
it's such and now it's such a saturated market, man. Trying to be like everybody else is just stupid, man.
We were the only show, like the only on-air show about professional wrestling. Dave Meltzer, was still mailing out his newsletters. Like, you didn't have his voice on the radio anywhere. You know what I mean? So for us, it was fantastic because we had carte blanche on everybody. You know what I mean? WWE was one of our very first interviews was Farouk, and they brought him to station in limo, drop him off, you know, and they couldn't have been any nicer. Like, I ended up befriending a couple of guys, so it made it much easier inside of the business once, you know, you have that connection. But I mean, we had everything handed to us. It was no problems. Right. Now there's like 30 million different pro wrestling, you know, news coverage places out there. And the nice thing is, you know, it's kind of like a double-edged sword, because it's a great thing for the business, because there's a lot better chance that you can get, you know, some recognition and your name out there a little bit, because somebody's going to have heard of you and been able to cover you somewhere, right? But then the other side of it is that there's so much saturation that it kind of gets lost in the mix, you know?
Yep.
So,
yeah. And Cory, you've interviewed, I mean, all sorts of people, man, not just, I mean, all over the spectrum. And like you said, there's people like I've definitely witnessed having guests that just don't have a good conversation skills. I
don't try to call people out for being sucky guests on the podcast, but it can happen. But it's really funny because from the start of me doing Evolving, so I started doing Evolving probably in 2017 is when I started it. And it was also in an internet radio station in the studio where I started doing it. And the kind of host I became, as far as like being able to work with somebody who's not giving me anything. So I actually don't mind at all talking to somebody who's never been on a podcast before, because this is all success practice for me. Yeah. So if I can get good when the stakes are low and no one's really paying attention, it'll make me fit to serve when I'm ready to step up.
Right.
And
well, I want to say, like, tonight's episode was supposed to be about phobias, but the conversation went so well I didn't even have to talk about it because it just flowed. You know what I'm saying? It did. I mean, it became conspiracy theories and everything else.
I'm scared of buying a house. Is that called a homophobia?
No, but seriously though, when it comes to podcasting, I mean, it's all about, especially when you're the host, it's definitely about being able to read your audience and read your guest. I mean, because you're not going to have every guest that knows what the hell they're doing. and being able to kind of help them or nudge them without like interfering with what you're doing. It takes a skill. It really does.
Well, I mean, that's like a big part of when I've been having guests lately. Not lately, just like the last couple of years, I've been saying like, check out the show and get a feel for what the vibe is, so that
Right.
like you'll know that it's this way. So I think I've gotten more fans of my show through having guests on and having them listen to it, and then they're like, "Yeah, I'm subscribed. I'm listening all the time now." Like,
Yeah.
So I probably have more former guests that are listeners to my show than I have actual listeners, like organically listening to the show.
What about you, Chris?
I mean, we have definitely been able to, especially through Godfathers of Podcasting, because, we've been fortunate enough to have like some really, really close connections with a lot of our guests. You know what I mean? Like, and I never want to be the guy that drops names and trips over them on the way down and stuff like that. But I mean, you can check out the site. And this is what I tell guys that we're trying to get, guys and girls, I should say, that we're trying to get as guests, is like, listen, here's the website. Go check out the list of people that we've had conversations with, watch a couple of shows, same kind of thing. Like get a feel for who we are. It's not just your typical, newsreel kind of, these are the 5 questions we ask. We try to have a conversation based on how it's going, same way that you do here.
Yeah.
And like you've said, like, it's just kind of, if you let it go in a certain direction, it just goes in a certain direction. And that's, amazing. Right.
Right.
So we've had conversations. I've had conversations with the same person on multiple occasions on the show. And each time, we learn something completely different about that person. So that's what makes it a lot of fun for us anyways. But yeah, I've had some guests on there, that have been like, after 2 minutes, I'm like, all right, well, this isn't working out. So we're going to say deuces.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Dude, I'm not going to get into like the exact specifics of it, but I had somebody on who was like, somebody who's been in tons of movies. Like, he was all over movies in the 90s, and he showed up to do the podcast on the StreamYard, and he just had his phone. I was like, how have you been in Hollywood and acting in all these movies, and the only thing you're doing is you're trying to talk to me on a phone to do a podcast? And then he was in the room. He was in a crowded room. A bunch of people were over his house. He was like snorting coke on the air. And I was like, bro, how am I doing this with you right now? Like, this guy was in so many movies when I was a kid. Like, the whole idea. Oh man, it is one of my least favorite episodes for sure.
Yeah. And it can get to the point, when something like that happens, you're like, after it's done, you're like, okay, I'm glad I'm out of it. And then the next day you're sitting there going, what the hell am I doing? Why am I exposing myself to this? Like, what the hell are we doing here? You know what I mean? And you have to pep yourself back up to get back in there again. Right. It's like taking a bad bump. You just have to decide right then and there, am I going to continue doing this? Right. And if you
Mike Birbiglia, are you familiar with who Mike Birbiglia is?
Yeah.
He said trying to get into comedy takes a level of delusion, because the first time you went up and it was bad, part of you had to go, that was good, I'm going to do it again. Like, there's some delusion, and it's become my duty to suss out what's delusional and what's actually good, and try to be realistic with the expectations.
I want to throw this out there. My wife hates talk radio. She says that this shit is so dumb, and this is nothing against her, because people don't like talk radio. That's fine. But
no, it's nothing against her. It's against you.
I don't even give a shit. But the stupidity in some of the most random conversation happens to be some of the best content that I've made or have gotten. on this, and some of the
Not
best
according to your
views,
wife.
some of the biggest viewed episodes happen to be the most explicit, off the wall shit that I've talked about.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
Why?
And
I don't
and
know.
also,
I don't
and
know why.
here's because we don't know. There's so many different people out there that have different opinions about what they think is entertaining to themselves. So all you can do is go out there and do what you think is entertaining and let them decide, right? You're not saying, and when your wife says, listen, I think that this talk radio stuff is dumb, and I think that what you're doing is dumb and it's pointless, and you say, yep, you're right. And I'm not sleeping with every woman in the world either.
Yeah, right.
This show may not be for you, but this dick ain't for them.
Yeah, it goes right back
Perfect
to
time
me
for the
saying, like,
bongo, Corey. Perfect time for the bongo.
the same thing I said, like, not everybody's for everybody, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, not everything's for everybody. Like, the music that you like isn't gonna be the same exact music I like everything across the board. What if everybody liked every single same thing that everybody else liked? We'd all be so boring. We'd all wind up resenting each other,
Right.
and
I was thinking about getting some sample tissues and just putting, if I offend you, here's a tissue, and then put my YouTube channel on there.
as a business card.
Yeah, that'd be my business card. It'd be perfect.
Amazing.
All right, hey, I do want to wrap this up, guys. I mean, we've been damn near hour and a half now. I think that the conversation was fantastic. Conspiracies, all wrestling. Look, I don't even like wrestling, guys. Nothing against it, but I fit in just fine in this conversation. So, see, it just depends on who you are as a person.
That's right.
All right, and
I think you got something over here. Just going to start patting yourself on the back there. Just a little
I'm
back.
gonna go wrestle my dogs after this. It ain't gonna be the same as what you guys do, but But all right, guys. Hey, until next time, and to everybody who tuned in tonight, we had SpaceX, Quiet Wyatt, Tiff, Jaeger popped in at some point. Appreciate you guys, and until next time, we'll see you all around.
Cheers, Eva.